So the next 4 classes, we're going to deal with concepts that relates to the high holidays. And I'm very, very excited. I really like this particular class. I gave it before, so I'm not so sure who heard it, or I think it was not in this forum. So that's good. Today also, we thank Miri for sponsoring the shiur in memory and in honor of the yortzeit of her mom, Gita Bat Shmuel, and may her memory be a blessing and an inspiration. So I'm apologizing for the low tech on how putting the sources. Usually I'm much more I put it nicely, and it's with the translation and the whole thing. Today, I didn't have a chance to do that. So, but nonetheless, I think it's going to be fascinating. I called it, what did I call it? The original sin and first repentance. And I hope that you'll find it interesting. The next 4 sessions, we're going to be dealing a little bit off the siddur. I'm going to go right into the end of Musaf of Yom Kippur. You don't have to look at anything. The end of Musaf of Yom Kippur, immediately after Seder Avodah, it's the time where everybody is kind of like, either schluffing or out of the shul or both. It's pretty much towards the break, okay? I'm kind of like, by myself at that point. But there's a piyut, there's a poem that's called Ele Ezkera. Ele Ezkera nafshi ve'ehemaya bi'ot. Okay. And basically, during that piyut, what happened, it's a lamentation on the death of Asara Rugei Malchut, the 10 martyrs that were killed by the Romans. Okay, pretty depressing stuff, to be honest. And that poem describes a conversation between the Roman emperor and the rabbis, the spiritual leadership of the Jewish people at that time. And basically what the Roman emperor tells them, he has a very good claim. He says to them, the Torah says, Gonev ish umecharo, somebody who, what the Torah says, stole a person, okay, or sells a person for slavery, the punishment is death. And he says, listen, your ancestors did that and they were not punished. The brothers of Joseph sent him, sold him to slavery. They were not punished for that. And I'm going to get even with you. I'm going to set justice. And therefore, there were 10 brothers involved with that, in that sin. And I'm going to execute the 10 leaders of the Jewish people. Okay. Obviously, it's a poem. It's not really, yes, they were killed, but that conversation probably is just a poetic, and those that were killed is Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and these are the ones that we called Asara Rugei Malchut, the 10 martyrs. And it's interesting because it's really unclear how this particular poem, this lamentation, ended up in the Yom Kippur liturgy. There's also, by the way, lamentations that are more connected to Tisha B'Av that talks about them, which makes more sense. But why Yom Kippur? So the classic explanation is because at that time, like all the material around that deals with what? The destruction of the temple. And what was the central, let's call it, theme or what was going on in biblical times, in the times of the temple, in terms of Yom Kippur? What was? No, it was the Avodah. It was this. All the stuff that was happening in the temple, the Kohen Gadol going to Kodesh Kodeshim, and you have the two goats and blah, 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 all that stuff, right? There was no sitting in or standing in shul the whole day and whatever, and, chazan singing. The whole ritual took place in the temple, and the Kohen, the high priest, was the star of the show. So what we say around that time in the tefillah, we say, look, we don't have it. God, we don't have the temple. We don't have the temple. We don't have the sacrifices. We don't have Kohen Gadol. So that's what we do. So please forgive us, even though we can't do those rituals. So the idea is that, okay, we don't have the temple. We don't have the rituals. We don't have Kohen Gadol. Why? Why we don't have them? Oh, because they were destroyed. Why they were destroyed? Because of sinat chinam or whatever, all that kind of stuff. What happens, and we start to kind of remember some of the historic events that took place around that time and stuff like that. And this is how that poem ended up there. But it's kind of like loose connection. What's fascinating is, if you look at the Ethiopian tradition, Jewish Ethiopian tradition, they call Yom Kippur Chago shel Yosef, the holiday of Joseph. This is how they call Yom Kippur. And according to that tradition, there's a close connection between Joseph, our biblical Joseph, and Yom Kippur. And it is based on something that is written in Sefer HaYuvalim. Sefer HaYuvalim is one of the, what we call Sfarim Chitzonim, how do you call them? The crop.
Oh, I know his name.
Yeah.
No, this is more in there.
Apocrypha, thank you. Just in one sentence, these are the books that were not added to the Tanakh. Okay? Various reasons, whatever. But Sefer HaYuvalim, the Jubilee, the book of Jubilee, is actually one of the foundations, or a lot of the Ethiopian traditions are based on the book of Jubilee. And basically, probably was written in the 2nd century BCE, and basically talks about the events from the creation of the world until the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. But what's interesting and different about that book, that it gives specific dates for certain events that we don't know. So let's take a look at source number 1. I'm sorry, I don't have a translation. We'll do it kind of as we go. ובשנה השביעית לשבוע ההוא, on the 7th year, on that week, שלח יוסף לראות את שלום אחיו מביתו שכמה. Okay, so Yosef was sent to check on his brothers in Shechem. So far is what we know. וימצאם בארץ דותן וירב לו והתנכלו לו לעמיתו, and they found him in Dotan, and they want to kill him. ויהי בהנחמם על מחשבתם וימכרו לארוחת ישמעאלים, and then they changed the plan. Instead of killing him, what did they decide? To sell him for slavery. So far, it's exactly what we know from the Tanakh. ויורידו אותו מצרימה וימכרו לפוטיפר סריס פרעה סירת טבחים כהן און, and he is sent to Mitzrayim, and he is sold to Potiphar, exactly like the story that we know. וישחטו בני יעקב שעיר עזים ויטבלו את כותונת יוסף בדמו וישלחו אותה ליעקב בעשירי לחודש השביעי. And what they do, they shecht the goat, they dip the coat in the blood of the goat. We know that story, and they give it to Yaakov. What's interesting is what? When this is happening, בעשירי לחודש השביעי, on the 10th of the 7th month. What is the 7th month in Tishrei, according to according to Torah, because the Torah starts counting from Nisan, right? So it's the 10th of Tishrei, which is what? Yom Kippur. Next one. לכן נועד בקרב בני ישראל להתאבל ביום העשירי לחודש השביעי, ביום אשר הגיע שמא אבל יוסף אל יעקב אביו. Therefore, the Jewish people mourn on Yom Kippur, meaning on the 10th of Tishrei, because that is the day on which Jacob hears about the death of Joseph. לבקש בו כפרה בשעיר עזים בעשור לחודש השביעי, אחת בשנה על חטאתם, כי הפכו את רחמי אביהם לאבל על יוסף בנו. And since then, the Jewish people, what? They ask for forgiveness. And how they do that? With a goat.
It's still a goat.
What?
And it's still a goat.
What do you mean still a goat?
I mean that it was a goat then, and it was a goat in the times of the Beit.
That's exactly what they say. And they say that this is why we use a goat as a symbol or asking for forgiveness, because of that goat that the brothers of Yosef, okay, and because what? Because they were, because of the sin, what they caused their father. וביום הזה, פסוק כ"ה, וביום הזה נועד להם להתאבל בו על חטאותיהם ועל פשעיהם ועל כל עוונותיהם, להתאר ביום הזה אחת בשנה. And since then, this day is for mourning, to remorse, to ask for tshuva, for all their iniquities, all their sins, so they can purify once a year. So, yes?
Is this book like out there available?
Yes. I have a copy of it in a box somewhere. Yeah, you can buy them. Yeah, they're published. So according to this source, the sale of Yosef, sending the coat in the blood, whatever, to Yaakov, all that stuff is taking place on what we call Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishrei. And therefore, the Seir Ezim, the goat that the Kohen Gadol in the times of the temple shecht as a symbol of kapara, asking for atonement on behalf of Am Yisrael, is an attempt to rectify that sin that the brothers of Yosef performed way before. So it seems that the sale of Yosef in Jewish tradition is kind of the original sin, unlike Christianity. They have different ideas of what's the original sin. And this is something that goes along with us. And since then, we've been, this is kind of like the stain on our history that we try to somehow purify ourselves from that throughout the generations. Okay. So now let's go back to Tanakh, to Sefer Bereshit, the way we know it. Okay. The story of Joseph and his brothers, one of the main stories in the book of Genesis. Okay. A lot of chapters, a lot of events from the beginning of the family until they settle in Mitzrayim, where basically the book ends. And a lot of the commentators are trying to figure out why Yosef is so cruel to his brothers when they come. Remember, there's a hunger in Israel and they come to get food. Joseph recognized them, get them through all those tests and everything. Basically, they have a very hard time. And the commentators are trying to understand what is it that Yosef is trying to achieve in all those actions. Okay, he puts Shimon in jail. He asks, "Bring Binyamin to me." Then he chases after them, and he creates this thing that as if Binyamin stole the silver cup, whatever, all that stuff. He sends the money back with them, like all that. What is going on? What is he trying to achieve? Okay. Look at what, there are a lot of answers, Look at what specifically what the Abarbanel is saying, okay? I'm looking at source number 2. The Abarbanel says the following. הנה עם כל הניסיון שעשה יוסף לאחיו בעליות המרגלים, with all the stuff that Yosef did to his brothers, עוד נשאר ספק בליבו, האם היה להם אהבה עם בנימין, או אם היו עדיין שונאים את בני רחל עמו. He still had a doubt whether they still hate the children of Rachel like him, and therefore they're going to deal with Binyamin the way they dealt with him, or not. ולכן רצה להביא את בנימין בפרט בניסיון הגביע לראות אם ישתדלו להצילו. Therefore, specifically, he wanted them to bring Binyamin so he can see whether they're going to make an effort to save Binyamin or they're going to dump him just like they did to him. אם יחמלו עליו וישתדלו להוציאו מעבודתו, if they're going to have mercy on Binyamin, they're going to try to redeem him, they're going to try to help him. יודע שהם אוהבים אותו, then Yosef would know that they love him, they love Binyamin. ויהיו בעיני יוסף בעלי תשובה גמורים, and therefore he considered them as בעלי תשובה, people who have repent. ויתוודע עליהם ויטיב עמם כמו שעשה. And therefore he will reveal himself and he's going to reunite with them. אבל אם המה יעזבו לעבד, however, if the brothers decide to leave Binyamin as a slave, that was the test. יודע שעדיין המה עומדים במרדם, ויתהפך להם יוסף לאויב והוא יילחם בם. Then, in that case, Yosef is going to be their enemy because they haven't learned and they still, they haven't changed. This is what the Abarbanel writes. So according to the Abarbanel, the whole purpose of this alienation that Yosef exhibits to his brothers, blaming them as being spies, the demand to bring Binyamin, all that stuff is what? Is to find out whether they're going to ditch Binyamin or not. Why? Because he wants to say whether they're going to do tshuva, whether they're going to repent, whether they're going to deal with Binyamin in a different way than they dealt with him. And when we look at that story, we see that there were like again and again and again, there were more and more opportunities for the brothers to prove themselves. And basically what Yosef is doing, he's setting up the scenario in such a way as close as possible to what happened with him 20 plus years before. The Rambam teaches us that the essence of tshuva, of repentance, is what? No, that's the beginning.
Oh, sorry.
It's being in the same circumstances and making a different choice. This is how you know that you corrected your ways. Yes, recognizing, yes. That's the beginning. But then you need to put yourself, or not to put yourself, but like if you happen to be in the same situation, let's assume that I was in a situation, I chose one way. The Rambam says, if I happen to be in the same situation, and this time I choose the good, let's call it the right choice, I make the right choice, then I know that I made tshuva. Okay? And by the way, and we know it. We know it. It's like people with addictions, people with, all sorts of stuff. When you know that, yes, there's alcohol here in front of me, but I choose not to take it, then I know that I'm good. theory is good, but like actual. Okay, I mean the same scenario again, friends are doing drugs, whatever that is. I choose not to. Okay, now I know that I'm in a different place. I made tshuva. I'm stressed at work, whatever, that kind of stuff. I take my anger at my kids and my family. The next time I don't, okay, I went through a process by which I don't make the same mistakes again. Okay, that's what the Rambam says. Therefore, Joseph is setting up the stage in a way to create the same scenario, the same circumstances as much as possible to see how they're going to react, what they're going to do. Are they going to make different choices this time? And this is probably most complete or detailed or whatever you want to call it, process of tshuva that we find in the entire Tanakh. Let's delve into that. Third source. So first of all, we need to understand what's going on over there, right? So I'm going to summarize that because we know the story. Jacob loved Joseph more than the rest. He made for him this special coat, and they sense that, and they hate him. Anyway, the opportunity comes, what?
Not just coat, I mean.
Obviously, because of
Jealous.
jealousy, whatever, we understand. Anyway, the opportunity comes, we know what's going on, right? They decide they want to kill him. Eventually, they decide to sell him for slavery into Egypt. And what do we do? They tell their father that Joseph was eaten by an animal. Right? That's basically what happens. The whole story deals with it interestingly, actually, from a grammar point of view. There's two shorashim. It's actually the two shorashim, two roots that actually connected. Is nakar, that's the shoresh nun kafresh, which is to know, to recognize, but it's also alienation, nikur. And the whole story is about that. Anyway, so horrible story. We know that story. That's kind of like the setting. So Yosef horad me, like, and then, like, and he is, we read about Yosef being sold, and if you remember, the Torah at that point cut the story, and there's a whole chapter that goes into a totally different, something totally seemingly unrelated. And not only that, when that story ends, the Torah goes back into the story of Joseph and said, Yosef horad Mitzrayma. Joseph went to Egypt, and then it continues the story with Joseph. So what is going on in between is the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Okay, so we're going to explore that. From that point on, the story from that point of Yehuda and Tamar and the continuation of the story of Joseph is going to be trying to replicate the incident that took place 20 years earlier. Okay? Okay. So what's going on with Yehuda and Tamar? We kind of know the story. Yehuda has 3 boys. Okay? And he and his oldest, Onan, and Shelah. These are the 3 names. Is getting married with a girl named Tamar. We don't really know if you want to look. at source 4. Er bechor Yehuda ra b'nei Hashem v'miteu Hashem. It was a bad guy. God decided to kill him. Okay, so Tamar is a widow. Remember, we talked about that in the past. There's the law of leverage in the ancient world at that time. Tamar is under family's protection. They need to, right? And so the brother has to marry her. And that's indeed what happens. Yibum, right? And then indeed Onan, the second brother, marries her, but he also dies. And what happens is, at that point, Yehuda says, I don't know, I'm not so interested in giving her to my third son because, yeah, there's got to be a problem. So what he does, he says to her, listen, he's too young. Why don't you wait up a little bit and we'll see what's going to happen. And she says, okay. I mean, not that she has like too many options. And during that time, at some point, Yehuda's wife dies. And she sees in the meantime that nothing happens and she's not, the years go by and she's in a limbo. And she decided to take action into her hands, and she disguised herself as a prostitute. Remember the story? And basically, she ends up with Yehuda, her father-in-law. He doesn't know that that's her. And to make a long story short, she's pregnant with twins. And Yehuda doesn't know that it's his, and so he thinks that she was unfaithful. He wants her to be put to death, and she says, "I'm pregnant from the person who is the owner of that stamp and whatever." She had like a couple, and then Yehuda says, "Tzadkami meni." She said, "She was right. I was wrong, not only for being with her, but also for not enabling her a future." And to make a long story short, the two, then there's twins, Zerach and Peretz. One of them becomes the great grandfather, right? Something, whatever. One of the ancestors of King David. And the whole tribe of Judah continues from there. Okay, so we know that story. Fine. So, there are a lot of motifs in that story of Tamar and Yehuda that are connected to the story of Joseph and the brothers. Just like, for example, the brothers, and maybe we can one day look in the text, but just like the brothers took undressed Joseph from the coat, it also, Tamar takes off her clothes and bigdei menuta, it says, like, the black clothes that widows used to wear, and she wears other clothes, I guess, what prostitutes do, like, different types of. So changing, undressing and putting a different clothes is something, it's a motif, and it's not only the clothes, the clothes symbolize something. Okay, the goat that they shecht, that the brothers shecht, and use the blood. Also, if you remember in the story of Tamar and Yehuda, as a payment, sent a goat. Okay, she's not anywhere to be found, so but that was the payment. It was a goat. And then perhaps the most striking hint is the phrase hakerna. Tamar says the word, please recognize this. Recognize this. And she's talking about the stamp and the ptilim, like, his personal belongings that he left as a collateral with her. Because he said to her, like, okay, what's your payment? He said, I'll send you a goat tomorrow as a payment. She said, you know what? I want a collateral. What's the collateral? Like his stamp, his personal belongings, that's all. And when she's taking out to death, she says, I'm pregnant from the person who is the owner of those articles. So she says to him, hakerna, recognize these. The brothers also use the same term, hakerna. Recognize this. Is this your son's coat that is smeared with blood? Hakerna. So the story of Tamar has a lot of the details, a lot of the information, a lot of the hints that happen to the story that took place 20 years before. And Yehuda, for example, is again in a very similar situation of rivalry, jealousy within the family, alienating a member of the family. Back then it was Yosef, now it's Tamar. So the idea of like bringing back all those motifs is to show us that Yehuda is on a test. And we want to see whether he's going to pass the test this time, because he failed last time. We want to see if he's going to pass the test. Is he going to make different choices this time? Remember, when it comes to Joseph, Yehuda says, he didn't care. Like, it's just like, what do we get from killing him? Let's just make some money on that. And he didn't even listen when Joseph was begging and crying. Now, Yehuda responds in a totally different way. Said, Tzadka, she was right, I was wrong. He recognized where he was wrong. He corrected his ways. He did not alienate her. And it seems that we have like sprouting of repentance. We have like the beginning of a process. Yehuda is going through a process. Something, he made other choices now. He chose in a different way. It's not enough. It's only the first step. Going into the second step. So the brothers, remember, when they come to Egypt to Joseph, he said, you're lying, blah, blah, blah. And what he does, you spy. And what he does, he throws Shimon in jail. Right? Look at the verse over there. I'm in source number 5. Yosef sees his brothers. He recognized them. And he's harsh with them. And he says, where you came from? And they said, from Canaan, from Canaan, to get some food. And he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. Again, it's this idea of recognizing versus alienation. By Yitnaker, he alienated himself from them. Okay. And he put them into a test. That's source number 6. He put them into a test, and he says, if you're honest, then one brother, again, because he was separated from the brother, so again, he's going to take one brother, going to stay here, and you can, you'll go back home. And not only that, you're going to bring your young youngest brother, bring them, and I'm going to see if you actually tell the truth. ויאמרו איש אל אחיו, אבל אשמים אנחנו על אחינו אשר ראינו צרת נפשו והתחננו אלינו ולא שמענו, על כן באה עלינו הצרה הזאת. And they say to each other, but we are to blame for what happened 20 years ago. We had a brother that he was begging us and we did not listen. Therefore, we're going through all this trouble now. It's because what we did back then. They start to recognize that, karma, let's call it. Okay? No, they told him about Binyamin. Yeah. He said, what's your story? And they said, well, we have a father, an old elderly father, and one of the one died and the other one stays with him. Yeah. No, they told him. ויסוב מעליהם ויבך וישב עליהם וידבר איתם וידבר קח איתם את שמעון ויאסור אותו לעיניהם, and he kind of put himself together because it was very difficult for him emotionally, and he goes to the side and he cries, but he puts him, but he gets himself together, and he takes Shimon and he throws him in jail. And not only that, he puts their money back in their sacks, like together with the food, and he sends them away. Jail. Shimon is being thrown into jail. Who was in jail? Yosef himself was thrown into jail, right? For 13 years. And we use the same word, bor, also. Pit. I think it's not a coincidence that the Torah uses, to make the connotation to that pit that they throw him into. It's not only the jail, it's like all the way to when they throw him in the pit. And Yosef does the same thing to Shimon, to one of the brothers, in order to see how they're going to react, what they're going to do. And in order to complete the test, he sends their money back with them. Why? One of the brothers is in jail. The other brothers are making money because they bought the food and got their money back. So that's what happened 20 years before. They made a deal. They were paid by those merchants. So he wants to set it up in a way that the circumstances are the same. They made a profit. Okay? To see whether they're going to make tshuva. And indeed, they declare, Aval Ashemim Anachnu. We are to blame. Just like Yehuda in the previous story said, Tzadka mimeni, Tamar was right, I was wrong, recognizing his role, his wrongdoing. Now the brothers recognize their wrongdoing. We're still far. There's no tikkun, not yet. There's no repair yet. Because what? Shimon, it's not that they hurry up immediately to release Shimon. They go back to Canaan, and they're going to be in Canaan until they have no other choice, when there's no more food. Only then, when they have no choice, they're going to come back and deal with the issue of Shimon also. Third trial. Even though they recognize their sin, right? We know they failed. They didn't rush back. They didn't fight with him. What do you mean? Shimon has done nothing. We're not going to let you throw him in the pit. Blah, blah, blah. They didn't do that. So they recognize, but they're still not correcting their ways. Okay? So only later on, they come back. Okay, I'm in source number 7. והרעב כבד מאוד, ויהי כאשר כילו לאכול את השבר אשר הביאו ממצרים, ויאמר אליהם אביהם שובו לנו מעט אוכל. After a while, food is finished, and Jacob tells them, go back, get us more food. ויאמר עליהם ישראל אביהם, אם כן איפה זאת עשו קחו מזמרת הארץ וכליכם והורידו לאיש מנחה מעט צורי ומעט דבש נחרות בלות בוטנים ושקדים. What's going on over there? Yaakov, so they say in the beginning, they said to Yaakov, we can't go back. Joseph didn't know it was Joseph. The guy told us, don't come back unless you bring Benjamin with you. And Jacob was reluctant to do that up until that point. So they had no choice. Okay. Fine. And then finally, Yaakov says to them, okay, we have no choice. Go. And they said, remember, we need to take Binyamin with us. And he said, you know what? If that's the case, take some goodies. Tzori, dvash, nechot, valot, batnim, shkedim, almonds, peanuts, honey, whatever, all sort of goodies, take with you. Hopefully, it's going to sweeten the deal. Why? Why, of all the things the Torah mentioned, that stuff? Why this is important? Almonds and peanuts and honey? Who cares? Exactly. And why this specific food?
Because they're all sweet. Some of the shed on me.
Yeah. All that thought, it's going to be that moment in a second. Exactly. Even though, by the way, some people have the custom not to eat nuts on Rosh Hashana also. Anyway, we're not going to go into that. Okay, so now when the brothers come to Egypt and they reunite with Shimon, I'm going to forget it. So let me just spill the beans already now. Why those specific items? Peanuts, almonds, honey, whatever. If you remember the story of the merchants that pulled Joseph from the pit, there were merchants. What they were schlepping? What was their merchandise? This stuff. Exactly that stuff. I don't know if it was chaser. It doesn't matter. The point is that the Torah is making a point to make the connection between the two stories constantly. Constantly. Okay? Okay. So they're back. They're going to reunite with Shimon. And what is going on over there? It's going to be again, Joseph is setting up the set. He creates a setting that is going to be very, very similar to what happened 20 years earlier. Listen to this, right? We're in source number 8. Right? Joseph says to them, you're going to have lunch with me. Okay? וישא וירד בנימין אחיו בן אמו ויאמר הזה אחי הקטון אשר אמרתם אליי ויאמר אלוהים יוכנך בני. And you recognize Binyamin and he says, is this your brother, your little brother? וימהר יוסף כי נחמרו רחמיו אל אחיו ויבקש לבכות ויבוא אחד רווייב, and Yosef can't take it. He runs to his room and he cries. ויחץ פניו ויצא ויתאפק ויאמר שימו לחם. And he pulls himself together and he washes his face and he goes and he in front of them and he says, okay, let's have lunch. וישימו לו לבדו ולהם לבדם ולמצרים אוכלים אותו לבדם כי לא יכלו למצרים לאכול את העברים לחם כי תועבה למצרים. Right? And the Egyptians are eating in one room, brothers of Joseph eating in one room, and Yosef is in a third room. Okay? Because Egyptians and Hebrews cannot eat together. It's an abomination. It's against the rule. Okay. וישבו לפניו הבכור כבכורתו והצעיר כצעירתו ויטמעו אנשים איש אל רעהו. And he set them up according to their age. And they're like, what is going on? It's not they're not kids. Like when you have kids, one is 6, 8, whatever, 10, 12, you can see who is older. When people, when they are like in their 30s or 40s, who knows? Like you don't know who is like older, especially they're like, maybe like a year apart or something. He doesn't know. And yet, of course, he is their brother, so he knows the order. He sits them and according to their age. And they're like, what is going on here? Okay? וישא מסות מאת פניו וירא ותרם מסת בנימין מסות כולם 5 ידות וישתו וישכרו עמו. And he gives them all presents. However, he gives Binyamin 5 times the presents that he gives the other brothers. Okay? This is setting up the stage. And they all have lunch and they drink and they
Wonder why we have.
yeah, but he's the viceroy, he can do whatever he wants. That's a whole debatable question. But even if they knew that originally he was a Hebrew or Jewish, he didn't act, right? He didn't act. He married a local to that extent that even his own brothers did not recognize him. He was completely assimilated. But Joseph wanted to examine, he wanted to put his brothers through a test. Therefore, he insisted that Binyamin is going to be there. Here too, just like in what happened 20 years before, the son of Rachel, back then it was him, now it's Binyamin, is going to be איך אומרים אפליה? The opposite of discrimination. Favoritism. He's going to show favoritism to one, favoritism towards one of the brothers on the extent of the others. Binyamin gets 5 times more gifts than the others, right? Just like Joseph got the coat, unlike the others, he got like preferred treatment. Joseph is going to give preferred treatment to Binyamin on the expense of the other brothers. And then there's a bogus story. Like, they threw him in the pit just because they just didn't like him. And they made up like some story that he was eaten. He's going to create some sort of also a cover story that Binyamin is what? Stole the goblet. The brothers got money from the merchants back then. Here, the brothers are going to get the money also. He's going to send their money back. So what Yosef is trying to do is to set it up in a way that is going to be as similar as possible to the situation back then. However, how the brothers react this time is completely the opposite. Back then, 20 years before, what did they do? They tear apart the coat, Joseph's coat. Here, they tear apart their own garments. When you tear apart a garment, your clothes, it represents mourning. That's what we do today in funerals. Yehuda already said, Tzadka mimeni. The brothers already said, Abal Hashemim anachnu. And now Yehuda is the leader in taking it to the next step. He takes it even a step further. Look at source number 9. Yehuda says, Vayomer Yehuda, ma nomar la'adoni ma nedaber u'ma nitzadak. What can we say? Ha'elohim matza et avon avadecha. God found us guilty. Hinenu avadim la'adoni gam anachnu gam asher nimtza gavia be'ado. all of us are going to be slaves to you. Not only Binyamin, all of us. Yosef takes it another step. He's still pushing the envelope. Still didn't get his answer. He says the following: "Vayomer chalila li ma'asot zot." He said, "No, I don't want that. I don't want you all. Ha'ish asher nimtza gavia be'yado hu yeh li abed, v'atem alu leshalom al avichem." I'm not gonna punish all of you. No, only the thief, only one. He wants to separate. He wants to create that tension. Are they going to stick with their brother or not? Last time they didn't. 20 years before, couple of months or whatever, a year. I don't know how long was it with Shimon. They did, like, they felt it, they wanted, but at the end of the day, they left him there in jail and went back to Canaan. Now Yosef says, no, you can go. It's fine. No hard feelings. Everything is good. Only him. He wants to say whether they're going to stick with him or not. Are they going to be loyal? And Yehuda really steps up here and he completes the whole process of tshuva to complete tshuva. Look at number 10. This is like the final sentence there. Ki avdecha arav et hanar me'im avi lemor. Because I am responsible for him. Im lo avinu alecha v'chateti lavi kol ha'yamim. I made a vow. I promised my father I'm going to bring him back safely. Look, and he takes it another step, Yehuda. Yehuda says, take me, let him go. That's the complete opposite. That's 180 degrees of what happened 20 years before. I cannot face my father and cause him such harm. They didn't think about their father 20 years before and what he's going to go through and all the pain that they caused him. What Yehuda says here is exactly being as close as possible to the same situation, and he's doing the complete opposite of what he did 20 years earlier. And therefore, for Yosef, that's the proof that they made tshuva. It's a full circle. And because of that, he says to them, V'lo yachol Yosef od litnaker elecha. He couldn't take it anymore. He recognized, he tells them who he is. They all cry. Eventually, the family reunite in Egypt. Okay, beautiful story. Fine. So we see the process. Yehuda recognized Tamar tzadka mimeni. Then the brother said, we are to blame. Later on, they're willing to sit with Binyamin in jail. And then the final step, Yehuda says, take me instead of him. And we have this concept in Judaism that we say, Maseh Avot, Siman Labanim. What happened to our ancestors, what happened to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, their descendants, from that we're supposed to learn about ourselves. What happens to us? It's a siman. Are we going to stick with our brothers or not? Are we going to form this of arevut, of being responsible to each other or not? Are we going to let our brothers suffer be thrown in the pit or not. The original sin in Christianity is the sin that we know. It's the tree of knowledge. It's a whole story, the story of creation. It represents men defeated by desire, urge. In Jewish tradition, the original sin that accompany us throughout the generation is the sin of responsibility, of relationship, of sticking with each other, of being responsible for each other, for family. And according to the Book of Jubilees, this is the nucleus. This is the idea that is in the basis of Yom Kippur. And as a reminder, we say that piyut, that poem of Ele Ezkera. Our sages says that En Yom Kippurim mechaper, right? Yom Kippurim is completely useless for any sins caused ben Adam lachavero, between men, ad sheyeratzeh et chavero tchila. If I harmed you, if I did something wrong, if I, whatever, I have a responsibility to come to you, ask for your forgiveness, try to make amends. Only then Yom Kippur kicks in. When I say, I go like this throughout Yom Kippur, and I say, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum Bechanun, all that goes if I accidentally forgot it was Shabbat, I didn't know it was kosher, whatever, all that stuff that's between Ben Adam LaMakom. But if I did something to you, I can do this the whole day. Nothing. Nothing. First, I need to work it out with you, compensate you, ask for forgiveness, whatever the situation is. Only then Yom Kippur kicks in. That magical power of Yom Kippur kicks in, and I achieve atonement or forgiveness. Not atonement, forgiveness. I'm going to say something that is probably politically incorrect. But I have to. And I don't care, it's recorded. We are in a time of history that is very much like that story. The biggest issue in Israel today is this idea of responsibility, of whether parts of the nation see themselves as responsible for their brothers or not. And what I'm talking about specifically, the hot topic, is whether the Haredi community is going to join the army or not. We can talk about that forever. But this idea of it's okay for them to go to the army to protect me, but that's okay. I can go about my life. I can do whatever that is that I do. Is so fundamentally against everything Judaism is all about that I can't express it in a more clear way. It's a distortion of Judaism, period. And I don't care that it's recorded and people are going to see that. And we're approaching now Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. And if we indeed understand, we want God to forgive us for stuff that we have done wrong. You know what's the prerequisite for that? is for us to come to God and say, listen, I'm willing to take it for him. He's my brother. If I can't do that, then God says, you want me to forgive you? I'm not cooperating. It's like, I'm sure every parent has been through that. You know, when the kids are fighting, sometimes you tell them, I don't want to know, work it out. Right? To some extent, God says, you want me, you want my help, you want my forgiveness, you want all that stuff. I'll give it to you. That's fine. But you work it out first. Show me that you are responsible for each other. Show me that you can live together, that you love each other, that you care about each other. Then I'm going to do my part. I'm going to forgive you for that Shabbat and that non-kosher food and whatever that stuff that happened. But you got to do your thing first. And as a final, because we are dealing with liturgy, final thought. Have you ever thought why we sing it so many times? Why is it? What is going on here? Do we really think that, this is like how Christianity, that, you say a certain text, you make a confession to the priest and you're all good? We don't believe in that stuff. We believe in actions. Because that's exactly what God says. God says, yes, that's the formula for forgiveness. I get it. I gave you that formula. I gave it to Moses back then when the Israelites sinned in the desert. I gave you that formula. Yes, but you know what? We have a problem in English sometimes. We interpret the word. God says, and that's based on Midrash, Ya'asu lefanai kaseder hazeh. In the time that Israel sinned, they need to perform this ritual. We tend to think about it as, okay, recite this formula and I will forgive them. God says, Ya'asu, that's the word that the Midrash says. Trust me, the rabbis, our sages knew their Hebrew. That shoresh means asiyah, action, to do. It's great that we sing it. It's great that we think about it. It's great that we recite it. But that's only the first step. It's supposed to move us to action. We're supposed to do that. And God says, you want my forgiveness? You forgive others. You want me to be slow to anger? You act that way towards the others. That is what Yom Kippur is all about. And so when you learn Torah, and you can learn Torah from morning till night, I don't really care. If that Torah doesn't move you to action, it's worthless. Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, repentance, we're now in Elul. All that stuff is connected to something very, very simple. Start working on the relationship that you have. Make sure you come to that holy day of Yom Kippur when you work it out. You have 40 days to work it out.
What if one side doesn't want to work out?
I get it. The rabbis deal with that. Forgiveness. There's a lot of, look, every case is different. There are no rules about it. But the basic concept is, you have 40 days before you come to God and ask for forgiveness. Because that's what God is going to ask you. What have you done before you come to me? Have you learned from Joseph? This is our original sin throughout the Jewish history. And this is how repentance is done. Recognizing, tzadka mimeni, aval ashemim anachnu, put yourself in the same situation, choose differently. Come to Yom Kippur before God and say, I chose differently. I could have got into a fight with my brother. I didn't this time. This is what it's all about. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We will continue next week, same time, same place. I will have for next time. I don't control that, but I will have for those who joining us online, and it's wonderful to see you all. Marvin, thank you. I will have it hopefully next time. Also, yeah, translate and printed nicely, but I can also upload it on the chat here, so people at home could look at the sources as well. Nikki, feel better? We'd love to see you next time. Okay, thank you, everybody.